Hello everybody. I know it's been a little while since I made my second to most recent video about the subject of Charlie Kirk. Apparently, I have upset some MAGA Snowflakes. Most of the people arguing in the comments, of course, made ad hominems and personal attacks, so they automatically lost the argument. Some disagreed and they just stated why they didn't agree, and you know, while they're wrong, I at least respect that they kept it to the why they didn't agree. So I'm going to respond to the comments in order. Normally I don't do this via a video, but I felt like there was enough of them to warrant a video. Joss234, and for just a second I thought it was a certain person that I refuse to ever speak to again. But I guess this isn't him. A lot of people are not thinking this through. The problem is that if it becomes okay to celebrate someone's death, then there's a chance that it'll be normalized in the future. And then there's the risk of idiots taking action and resorting to violence. Well, here's the thing. This kind of thing has been happening since the beginning of time. Celebrating what happened to someone, you know, that happens all the time, and there's nothing you can do about it. And every single person who celebrated what happened to Charlie Kirk, whether you think they should have or should not have. And personally, I don't think they should have. Because, number one, when it happens to someone they agree with, then they're going to whine and they're going to cry. And number two, if you're going to celebrate, at least do the right thing and do it in private. Just because, you know, you got people who are like, you know, making jokes about, you know, what happened to George Floyd, attacking his daughter, making fun of her for what happened to her father, you know, after she was identified and, you know, bullies in her schools. You know, I try to ascribe to the principle that we shouldn't, you know, just, you talk shit, get hit. But, you know, frankly, I think that's going to have to be an exception. But anyway, you know, these people joked about Paul Pelosi being beaten with a claw hammer, slandering and smearing him, making jokes about what happened to Melissa Hortman. Now, not every MAGA person did any of those things, of course. But, you know, some of them did, and to any of them who did, and then they're crying over Charlie Kirk. The man is not coming back. He is dead forever, and that's where it ends. There is no such thing as heaven or hell. He is gone, and that is that. And legally, Joss, there's nothing you can do to prevent people from celebrating someone's death. And, you know, I don't think there's any, you know, statistical evidence to prove that, you know, people celebrating when someone dies is going to lead to an increased risk of violence. You know, it's not every 5 minutes we're having these kind of political assassinations anyway. That's not a world I'd like to live in. I don't mind dark jokes or making fun of almost everything, but there's lines you just don't cross. Well, you can't enforce that via the law. Social media is a great thing, but at the same time it can be dangerous for others. I'm not a holy person, but damn, the left celebrating looked really demonic as hell. You know, I mean, I've seen people make jokes about what happened. Like, there's a song, you know, where, you know, my neck. I hate to admit I laughed, but it was funny just because it's like, it's from that one song where that chick's like, my neck, my back. That's it. You know, that's why I thought it was funny. But here's how I truly feel about Charlie Kirk. He was an idiot. He debated amateurs and he made himself look good. He cut out a lot of parts where he faced his match. That didn't get included in videos, but that didn't justify. And yeah, he held, you know, repugnant views. That doesn't justify what happened to him. That doesn't mean that we should just, you know, encourage or tolerate or celebrate just because, you know, there could be someone that fits what the left feels like is a good person, right? And, you know, this kind of thing could happen to them. Well, you celebrated when someone you didn't agree with was assassinated. Well, it can happen to your side too, and it shouldn't happen at all, but, you know, it doesn't feel so good now, does it, kind of thing. I love horror movies, but not in real life. Yeah, honestly, I really wish I hadn't seen, like, the video, you know, where he went, like, that was not, that was something else, just because, how do I put this? Before I saw the video, I thought he had a chance of pulling through. As soon as I saw the video, I knew he wasn't going to make it. You know, I refreshed Wikipedia a few times, and then they edited it to say that, you know, he didn't make it. And I was like, oh. I mean, politics, whether you love or hate the man, or if you're indifferent, is just not going to be the same without him. Anyway, if I hired someone who celebrated, I'd fire them because it's disturbing and scary. Yeah, fuck that. I'm good. I want peace, man. Freedom of speech has been weaponized and too many lies have been told. It's toxic and should never happen because if of it someone died, everything has limits. It's common sense. I'm going to have to respectfully say, fuck no. Personally, if I had an employee who celebrated, I wouldn't fire him. I would say, look, man, I strongly disagree with you. I think you're a piece of shit, but, that's not exactly my problem because if you're doing the job you're supposed to do, what you say outside of the job, for me, I wouldn't care, Even if I agreed with the person that was assassinated, I wouldn't care because it's like, you didn't say that representing the company. If they said it in the company uniform, then yeah, I would fire them. But that's why I think you shouldn't put what your career is on like LinkedIn or a resume or whatever. That's just a bad idea, especially if you're going to be in politics. Because you got MAGA snowflakes, you got progressive snowflakes, or so-called liberal snowflakes, who will try to get you fired for an opinion, whether it's you think that he deserved the bullet, or, you have like any other opinion, no matter how milquetoast or mild. I mean, Charlie Kirk wasn't center-right, but I think comparing him to Hitler is a bit disingenuous. Anyway, as for freedom of speech being weaponized, that's bullshit. There is no legitimate reason to restrict freedom of speech. I don't care how traumatized you were by seeing what happened to Charlie Kirk, or if you cried your eyes out, if you feel bad for his family. Fuck that. People have the absolute right to make as many jokes about this as they want without the state punishing them. If a private company wants to fire them, that private company has the right, as far as I'm concerned. Whenever I hear all these people that are like, oh, let's put up a website and, we're going to get everyone fired. It's like, you know what? I hope people make more jokes about it. People were making jokes about what happened to Donald Trump last year, and we're getting fired for it. And here's the thing, right? I'm glad he didn't die, just because I know that if this is how people are reacting for Charlie Kirk, then imagine just how ugly it would have gotten if it was Donald Trump. I mean, these people, like, all these public tributes, and it's like, it's just so pathetic. He was a fucking political commentator. He wasn't like a former president or, a war hero or, someone that really contributed a whole lot to humanity. That's not to say that he deserved it. That's not to say his life didn't matter. It's just saying these tributes have gotten ridiculous. And in the end, I think everyone should realize that, it's a shame people don't have that kind of compassion towards, people in real life. A lot of these people who are like, if you celebrated what happened, unfriend me, you didn't even know who he was until like this happened, so fuck off. But anyway, I'm sorry, freedom of speech being weaponized and too many lies have been told. And what are we supposed to do about that, huh? Like, it sounds like kind of like an excuse to have a ministry of truth. And that's not to say that he would support that, but, that's just a little dystopian. The dark conservatarian who... I will have that phone call with you. Anyway, he says garbage take about... And to be clear, yes, he voted for Donald Trump, and I strongly disagree with that vote. That will have to be another conversation for another time. And to be clear, I would be devastated if anyone, harmed the dark conservatarian. I've known him for 8 years, almost 8.5. I do respect him, but I do have some fundamental disagreements. Garbage take about the subject of Kirk being taken out of context. Sure, people can always articulate their words better, but the way you speak about it is as if you're making excuses for the morons taking him out of context. Especially when you call the people correcting the miscontextualizations whining. I would say that the people taking him out of context, yeah, that's stupid. I think if you show the full quote, let people come to their own conclusions. But I think that's like the least terrible of what's happened. I think that, what happened to him is worse than any taking him out of context. I think the calling for it to happen to other people is objectively worse than them taking out of context. I think if the MAGAs want to really score any moral points is to say, the calling for extra violence is wrong and that it shouldn't be tolerated. But getting the state involved is where I say fuck everybody involved here. with regard to, so it's not whining to correct them, but I think it's, the energy should be focused on, like, oh, they said they wanted to happen to Ben Shapiro. They want it to happen to all these other people. It's like, okay, now they are inciting violence. That's where I would draw a line. I mean, I wouldn't send them to jail, but I would fire them. Because, I think someone can say, like, oh, the Queen Elizabeth died? Good. That's not them saying they want it to happen to King Charles, Anyway, now that Google, and then Wind Chill. Oh, no, I forgot to respond to the rest of this. Especially when two or more of the popular miscontextualizations sound a lot better when someone listens to the full thing. Like, somebody says Kirk thinks empathy is bad. Like, I read the full quote about empathy. And I understand where he's coming from. I personally think, just rather than, sympathy, it's like, okay, I can agree with, compassion is better. Because sometimes you just can't put yourself in someone else's shoes. I think it would have been smarter for him to say, I understand where those who are empaths are coming from, but sometimes you just can't put yourself in someone else's shoes. Sometimes, like when someone tells me they've gone through something terrible, like someone I know, had a stillbirth a few years ago. I said to her, like, I can't even imagine what you're going through. I'm very sorry for your loss. And whatever I can do to help, I'll be more than happy to help. But, I can't put myself in that family's shoes, And I don't know, sympathy, it just sounds like insincere. And empathy can be, suicidal empathy, like when they think that, when they support open borders. This isn't like Donald Trump, where there isn't some unquoted second half to whatever he says, and he makes his statement sound better. No, Kirk isn't the same as Trump on the levels of inarticulateness. Well, I mean, to be fair, when he said that he trusts the government, I feel like there was nothing he could have done to articulate that better. So I'll say, look, I'll clarify. Correcting people who take his quotes out of context, fine, that's great. But I think it matters more that some people have called for violence. And like, oh, it happened to Charlie, it should happen to Ben Shapiro next. Like, call that out first. The quotes, that's trivial. Wind Chill is not happy with this video, and I'm hoping Wind Chill cries about it. Wind Chill says, now that Google has admitted that the Biden administration forced them to censor conservatives, you decided to post this retarded-ass video about your leftist lunatics getting fired. I don't have leftist lunatics. I'm not a slave owner, you sick fuck. For being vile retards in social media platforms, look in the fucking mirror and ask your retarded-ass self if all this is justified, since you leftist cunts loved to shoot down conservative voices. Wow. I don't take personal attacks seriously from people that can't even, proofread their own comments. This is not the right censoring the left. Yes, it fucking is. The fact that they were, they're members of Congress wanting to ban people from the internet for life for making jokes or celebrating what happened. It's like, yeah, I typically say, let's not celebrate what happened to somebody when they die. I mean, there are certain people, yeah, I would totally celebrate. Like George W. Bush. I celebrated when Henry Kissinger died. I'm willing to admit that. When Dick Cheney goes, I will celebrate. And if you don't like it, fuck you. This is the right holding the left accountable for every leftist retarded hypocrisy. Holding them accountable how? Sicking the state. Like, I have said for 10 years that getting people fired for something they said online is stupid. There is no constitutional right to a job. There is no constitutional right of the state to protect your feelings from reading stuff you don't like. Wind Chill, first of all, if you think I'm a leftist, I can assure you that my views compared to yours, you are to my left. If you voted for Trump, the chances are you are to my left, especially in the economic sphere, given that Trump is a 79-year-old pro-abortion New York liberal. He's like a 90s Democrat. Anyway, I haven't censored anybody. I'm not a leftist. I haven't done any of what you've accused me of, so fuck you, your mother, and the horse she rode in on. And basically the right has said with these actions since Trump took office is they are fine with a police state. These MAGA idiots that voted for Trump all 3 times, or at least once or twice, have made clear that every bad thing he's done, they voted for. No matter how many careless mistakes or broken promises, they voted for him, and they deserve to be blamed for all of it. And once again, that does not justify political violence. It's not a legitimate means of handling political disputes. I would say that if you're a MAGA person and you regretted it, stop voting MAGA then. You have so many ballot options, and no, that doesn't mean vote for Kamala Harris or the Democrats. There are other parties on the ballot. But it will hand the elections to the Democrats. Then abolish first past the post. Okay. Jesus Christ, how far did these comments go? Anyway, the super awesome Victoria show said, I never watched Jimmy Kimmel in my life, and although he is obviously a puppet for the establishment, I fully support his right to go on TV and say bad jokes. He is no Conan. I watched Jimmy Kimmel once, and that was a mistake because he cries all the fucking time. Like, I have no problem with people expressing emotions. It's perfectly fine, but Jesus, get a fucking grip. Whatever you allow to happen to the other side will be what eventually happens to you when the other side takes power. The film The American President has a great part where Douglas speaks about the importance of free speech, especially free speech you don't like. That's the good stuff. Well, there's nothing I disagree with that statement. I mean, the MAGAs complained in 2016 about censorship and political correctness and, people getting fired for saying controversial things because someone on the internet didn't like it. Well, this kind of makes the horseshoe theory sound true. Because, you got the MAGAs, kind of moving to the left on economics, embracing state capitalism or just full-blown socialism. Justin Weber 9968 says, Jimmy Kimmel was let go by a private company and later reinstated, or whatever the arrangement was. This isn't some grand free speech issue. Well, the President of the United States and the FCC pressured them to do this. After Colbert was let go, he's been canceled. It will be taking effect next year. He made it clear he wanted Kimmel next. Personally, if I had it my way, if I could rewrite the Constitution, the President of the United States wouldn't have the right to pressure companies. Like he could say what he wants, but he couldn't legally force them to. You want companies to change their policies? Well, you got to pass a bill, but it has to get 60% of the vote in Congress, otherwise it won't become law. Because he's made it clear he will abuse his power just because he's still pissed he lost the 2020 election. And let's not forget, Kimmel himself openly celebrated Trump's removal from Twitter. Twitter felt that he violated their guidelines. Personally, look, Kimmel violating their guidelines. How about I go like this? They would have to prove Kimmel lied about the assassination of Charlie Kirk and that he knew that what he was saying was a lie. Now, the MAGAs can't prove it. They'll insist, but insisting isn't, proof. As for Trump being banned from Twitter, during the 2020 election, his posts were flagged over and over again. This is just for context. His posts were flagged for, false statements, which personally, it's like sometimes, Elon has democratized fact-checking, which in some ways is helpful, but in other ways it's nonsense. Would I have banned Trump from Twitter? Honestly, no. Because I'd like to be fully aware of what he's up to, what he wants to do, what he's planning, how he feels about stuff. Because the minute he goes underground and in the dark, it's like you don't know what shit he's up to. And, like all these people who wanted him banned or removed from Twitter, it's like there is no legal right to have a Twitter account, but you don't have the right to force companies to ban people from the internet. So to quickly just respond to that idiot Windchill, Biden censoring conservatives online is wrong. Of course, no shit. But that doesn't give the right justification to do the same thing. Like, if the left sexually assaulted someone on the right, that doesn't mean the right has the right to do the same thing, you know. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. Anyway, but here's the real distinction. The left canceling people for saying men are men, or even for playing a Harry Potter game because they dislike J.K. Rowling. That's just social pressure being weaponized to shut down opinions that they don't like. It's ugly, but it's not remotely the same thing as celebrating a political assassination. And Jimmy Kimmel wasn't celebrating a political assassination. And here's the thing. Celebrating a political assassination isn't a crime. And whether people were canceled, quote unquote, for saying men are men, or, you know, liking Harry Potter, or celebrating political assassination, the fact these people really wasted their time to get people fired, it's like you people could have put your energy to anything more positive or worthwhile. Like, sure, you got people fired and banned from certain platforms or whatever, but, you know, Charlie Kirk is still fucking dead, okay? He was a fucking political commentator. He was not that special. He didn't deserve what happened to him, of course. But there are more important things to be outraged about, you know? Like, I think you can say the person who did this to Kirk should be fully prosecuted. He should spend the rest of his life in prison. The death penalty shouldn't be applied in any cases, no exceptions. But this wasn't like 9/11 or Pearl Harbor. You know, I feel bad for his kids, and that's it. You can tell his wife doesn't give a fuck. Let's see. The former is about forcing conformity by punishing speech. The latter is effectively saying we condone right-wing people being killed for simply holding right-wing views. That's not parallel, that's textbook false equivalence. I just say that you shouldn't get people fired for stuff you don't like them saying on the internet. If companies want to fire them, then that's, you know, freedom of association. But the fact these keyboard warriors got people fired for saying whether they held conservative views or they're making fun of the assassination of a conservative, it's like, you guys have really easy lives. Like, you guys have nothing going on in your lives if this is what you guys are getting so riled up about. Hi, thanks for the reply, says the super awesome Victoria Show. I think you missed the intent of my reply. It is exactly a free speech issue. Not a grand one, but a small Jimmy-sized one. Canceling anyone in a free society makes them more popular. Alex Jones is a good example. Personally, I wouldn't have banned Alex Jones from Twitter or any social media platform. If I was the owner of a social media platform, I would just regularly make fun of him and say, look at this mentally ill loser and his idiot followers. Aren't they pathetic? You know, I don't think banning him from a social media platform was a good idea. Like, as much of a despicable piece of shit as he is, you know, banning someone from a social media platform makes them a martyr. Just like how Charlie Kirk shouldn't have been assassinated because, one, it's wrong. Two, it makes him a martyr. And three, again, political violence is not a legitimate means of resolving political disputes. Jimmy did not celebrate Charlie's death. He just took a swing at MAGA at a very improper time with something that everyone knew was a lie. However, you know, you're going to have to prove that he knew that what he was saying was a lie. He was insinuating that conservative families can be just as toxic as Democrats. Well, I mean, that's not exactly wrong, though. I mean, there are some people on the right who are extremely toxic with their points of view. Basically, if you don't agree with them, they will have paramilitary groups come after you. They will censor you. They will like, there was a professor watch list that the Turning Point people created where, you know, people were getting doxxed, rape and death threats, you know. So, like, Charlie Kirk wasn't a nice guy. Turning Point USA, they're not good people. Again, doesn't justify what happened to Charlie Kirk, but, well, there's no but, you know, he wasn't this nice guy who just did debates. Like, as far as I'm concerned, all these colleges having Turning Point USA, it's like, I would withdraw my kids from those colleges. Like, you guys are pathetic. They're capitulating to MAGA. They're capitulating to the president more specifically. And all these people holding, like, tributes of Charlie Kirk, it's like, I don't want to have anything to do with them. They're only doing this because it's performative. They don't give a shit. Everyone who made fun of Charlie Kirk for what happened to him, I think cared more about him than those that are pretending, the crocodile tears making the videos, being like, oh, it's so sad. I didn't know personally, but it's like they're doing it for views. And you know his wife doesn't care. You know, not even a full month after he died, she's on podcasts smiling. And I know we all grieve differently. I know that. But it just doesn't feel like it this time. You know? Like, grieve however you want to grieve. But even at the fucking funeral. And even the first public speech she made after he died, it's like you can tell the emotions are fake. And she just kept repeating herself. You know, he's something. And then she's smiling and talking about vengeance. It's like, okay, I don't take you seriously. You're just grifting off your husband's corpse, using him as a platform. Anyway, then, let's see, where else? Those who did celebrate Charlie's death and call for more like Destiny have been rightly removed from the platforms they used. I'm shocked Destiny hasn't been charged. Jimmy is not Destiny. Yeah, and, you know, I don't feel bad for Destiny. I mean, he's a weirdo anyway, but, you know, if you are outright saying that this kind of thing should happen, it's like, okay, then that is crossing a line. Being like, he, you know, neck boy. But you didn't say it should happen to anyone else. It's like, okay, not my kind of thing to do, but, you know, I guess you do you. Justin Weber responds, I don't even see this as a free speech issue, at least not the way it's being framed. The left-wing media cast it as Trump suppressing a comedian's speech. But what actually happened was that Bob Iger at Disney pressured ABC to have Jimmy correct a falsehood he aired. Jimmy refused, and that refusal led to his temporary removal. To me, that's simply a case of private company protecting his reputation. They asked for a correction, he wouldn't do it, and they let him go. Now, that's fine. If it is truly a private company saying, you know, like, man, we don't agree with that, and, you know, either you correct it or we're done with you. But let's not pretend like there was no chance of Trump, you know, putting his, you know, tiny thumb on the scale. You know, this is a man who would often call CEOs of companies trying to interfere in the economy, trying to make them do stuff he wants. And personally, I think CEOs should just start turning down phone calls from the president. You know, why do you need to call CEOs? Why are you trying to interfere in every facet of American life? The White House, as far as I'm concerned, the next president should be stripped of a lot of powers. I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat or whomever. You know, when the president, you know, disobeys the courts and ignores, you know, when the courts go against him, then the president should just be stripped of power and should be just deposed of, you know, via impeachment, and just, you know, no voting rights, no pension, no none of that, no ability to hold office at any level in the United States. Just because it's clear that they need to Trump-proof the government. You know, like, I'll make a full video explaining what an abortion of an administration he has, but, you know, he is a big government Republican, and that is perhaps more dangerous than a big government Democrat. They're both dangerous, though. The government can't criminalize you for speech unless it meets very specific criteria, but the company you work for can terminate your contract. It's no different from a McDonald's employee who says something offensive. Their speech might be legally protected, but McDonald's can still fire them. What's galling is the sleight of hand. It's the same left-wing media that has shown zero compassion for a man when a man's words got him killed, suddenly claimed to care deeply about free speech because a comedian lost his job. Jimmy's situation was never really about free speech. It's just that the media had a vested interest in portraying it that way. Well, you know, when they're telling, to me, it's more broad than that. It's more like the administration is telling, legal immigrants, those with visas, that if they make jokes about what happened or celebrate, then they're deported. You know, the MAGAs have made it clear. They don't believe in anything. They don't believe in freedom of speech, the right to bear arms, the right to privacy. They believe in nothing. You know, Donald Trump could say he believes in the Austrian painter and his beliefs, and the MAGAs would eat it up. It's a cult of losers and suckers. And then Justin Weber replied to his own comment saying, question, do you realize the left has spent the last decade canceling people, even their own for all over sorts of things. And yeah, and they're losers. To me, I have never gotten someone fired for something they said on the internet because I had much better stuff to do. Even when I thought they were a piece of shit, and I wouldn't feel bad for them if anything happens. I don't have that kind of time or energy to care enough to get them fired. And because, it's only going to make their followers believe that they're right about something, even though it doesn't. The very same media machine that now cries free speech has spent years for calling for almost every comedian on the planet to be canceled over offensive jokes. And that's why I don't take the press seriously on this matter. Like, in the UK, when Count Dankula, he had his pug do the Austrian painter salute, and I thought, okay, you're an idiot. I mean, he looks like a douchebag, but that's not legitimately a crime. The fact he was prosecuted, as far as I'm concerned, God, I can't stand Nigel Farage, but I think whomever wins the next general election in the UK has to just say, look, we're imposing a very, very stringent pro-free speech law. We will overturn every conviction related to free speech without exception. And basically, we will not allow Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, or Wales to pass or Westminster itself to pass legislation that, via constitutional reform to ensure that they can't criminalize speech ever again. They have a hate speech law in Scotland that can be so easily abused, and it's dystopian how that went down. Justin, the super awesome Victoria show. Wow, I made this video 3 times longer than I wanted. Agreed, but that shouldn't be the other side emulates. You are on the ball. Even Emma Watson is backpedaling on her comments against J.K. Rowling. Yeah, exactly. Then some guy with an idiotic screen name, Dipshitska3063. See, the thing is, and it's a fact, that the First Amendment went down the road with the Biden-Harris administration. You say one-off comment about transgender at the LGBTQ bullcrap, and you would be censored, and probably your ass kicked. Again, the Biden-Harris administration's record on freedom of speech is dog shit. Doesn't mean that the Trump administration has handled freedom of speech very well. I mean, when you have Trump on video saying we've ended freedom of speech, it's like, even if it's taken out of context, it's like, oh my God, he's just giving his opponents ammunition to, no pun intended, to say, look, here is this fascist Nazi. And it's like, well, I think it's just ridiculous how easy it is for him to say something stupid and his supporters are upset. Well, that's not what he meant. Well, then he should probably be more clear. He has the attention span of a 5-year-old, and the fact that 77 million people thought that guy was smart enough to be president should tell you that they failed a civics test. Ogre the Berserker 2618 says, I'm going to tell you right now, you said you're going to debate somebody. I'm going to tell you you're most likely going to lose, because everything you've expounded is either from a base of knowledge or listening to a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th party where you just don't understand the definition of a fascist or a dictator. I mean, Donald Trump admires fascists and dictators for being fascists and dictators. He doesn't care about the Constitution. He floated the idea of terminating the Constitution, being a dictator on day one. And you can say all you want, he's joking. I don't think he is, because, if you're so tired of Trump being called a dictator or a fascist, then maybe he should stop praising them. The fact he couldn't just condemn Vladimir Putin, and the fact he gets played like a fiddle by Vladimir Putin, it shows he is both infantile in thinking and just has no grasp on reality. And the fact he's such a power-hungry piece of shit should tell you that, he deserves to be called a Nazi and a fascist. Because the abuse of power, the willingness to ignore the courts just because he didn't agree with the ruling, frankly, as I've said, when a head of state ignores the courts, and even jokes about terminating the Constitution, that should be automatically disqualifying. Stripped of power, unable to hold power for the rest of their life. Because trust me, if we had a dictator in the office right now, you'd be arrested for everything you just said because it's public knowledge, and a real dictator would be hiring people to find people like you. So that kind of destroys the fascist and dictator speak. Well, Rome wasn't built in a day. I mean, I'm not saying Trump's going to come after me, but what I am saying is that, all these idiots that said Joe Biden was a dictator, then how did Donald Trump come back? If they stole the 2020 election, how did he make a comeback? Like when they thought the deep state tried to take him out last July, okay, they wouldn't have used a 20-year-old who couldn't even aim a gun correctly. If they were going to take him out, they would have done it already. Then Wiggles TTH says that my head is empty. And what I say to him is, no, you, and I can tell because I just feel bad for his mother, because the doctor that delivered Wiggles TTH was a third-rate abortionist. Anyway, Slapstick 2306. It wasn't that Charlie was easy to take out of context, he was always very clear, but what the left did was take his quotes, cut them off at a certain point, and make them look like a completely different message without any context, and then spread those quotes. And I don't agree with doing so. I just don't think that's the worst thing that they did. I think the calling for extra violence was objectively worse, okay? Anyway, and let's not forget, they did this on the very day his life was taken, and on the very day Paul Pelosi's head was beaten with a claw hammer, people made jokes and falsely accused him of having a gay lover. The very day George Floyd was murdered, there were people making jokes about it, saying that he deserved it. The fact that anyone mentioned his criminal record tells you they endorse what happened to him. Because guilty people, those who are bad people, that doesn't mean the police have the right to take their life. Just saying. Of course, you can disagree and speak your mind, but twisting someone's words on purpose is simply dishonest. I don't disagree with that. And sharing those twisted quotes on the day his life was taken is nothing less than evil, yet evil may voice its opinion. Charlie was a great debater. That's why they had to twist his words, call him names, and even go so far as to take his life. Well, then how come he didn't have totally raw, unedited debates with people? I'm just saying. They couldn't handle his message, which is now stronger than ever. Rip Charlie. His message is stronger than ever. Stronger than his neck. If you think MAGA censorship is an issue, then and this is from J Warner 795. If you think MAGA censorship is an issue, then you're very politically inept and don't understand who is behind hate speech, censorship, or forced speech like pronouns. Bring this back to the fentanyl, Floyd, and Black Lives Matter. Didn't hear much crying from freedom of speech then. For freedom of speech then. Charlie was killed because of his speeches. Think, young one, think. Well, first of all, hate speech, of course, isn't a real thing. And Pam Bondi, said the term hate speech unironically. And MAGA thinks she's a great attorney general, except, a lot of them want her gone because she, like Donald Trump, won't release the Epstein files. And, Trump is a rapist pedophile. The fact he won't release the Epstein files, to me, says he's on the files and that he's guilty of something. Otherwise, he would have released the files. All the names of the perpetrators, no one is spared. Any MAGA who disagrees with the statement, release the files, is a pedophile. Well, what about, how come Biden didn't release the files? They were blocked by court order from releasing the files. And, Trump has made clear, when the judges would say that his deportations or tariffs are unconstitutional, he'd ignore the courts. And they're like, well, we're going to ignore the courts. Well, he could have ignored the courts and released the Epstein files. So, the MAGAs are just, retarded functionally if they make excuses over that. You didn't hear much crying for freedom of speech then? Well, then you clearly have wax in your ears. There were people who were concerned, left, right, and center, about censorship over criticism of the state's handling of COVID or of vaccines. And I don't agree with the vaccine skeptics, but I think they have the absolute right to refuse the vaccine. And I think the state should not penalize people for not having the vaccine. And with the people saying fentanyl Floyd, again, Charlie Kirk's fans went after George Floyd's daughter, making fun of her for what happened to her father, targeted her with harassment, and all of them can go to hell. Charlie Kirk said George Floyd was a scumbag and that he didn't deserve what happened to him, but it's like, you called him a scumbag. You could have just said he didn't deserve what happened to him. So it's like, and Derek Chauvin was a piece of shit. So, hopefully the rest of his life is spent in prison. Then Chris Naylor 9488 says, Jesus, anyway, we'll just memory hole the fact the Biden administration pressured Twitter, Facebook, Google, YouTube, etc. to silence millions of people from expressing their honest objection to COVID and the response to it and the election problems, which the election wasn't stolen. Threatening them with their Section 230 protections. We need to get rid of Section 230. But of course that's different because it could rock your famed moral superiority complex. Well, Chris Naylor's a retard. Charlie Kirk said, supporting bad ideas only makes them grow. Well, Charlie Kirk had a lot of bad ideas. Didn't justify what happened to him. Celebrating and making lists of who should be next only makes this grow. Examples you may have missed. A pro-Palestinian shot up a New Hampshire country club this week. That's wrong. Shouldn't have happened. Fox News had a bomb placed on one of their vehicles. Oh, and, pro-Palestinian shot up a New Hampshire country club. South Carolina Republican legislator pleaded guilty to being a pedophile. Fox News had a bomb placed on one of their vehicles. A guy killed the former Minnesota House Speaker. A lefty shot up an ABC station over Jimmy Kimmel's suspension. A guy killed 2 teenage girls and said that they had made fun of what happened to Charlie Kirk. A gunman shot at ICE agents. Well, ICE agents used zip ties on children. This is just in the last couple of weeks. Do you get it yet? If you are this cognitively impaired, can you please step out of the discussion? Well, don't pretend you don't support political violence, Chris Naylor. Just given the fact you support this president. Kurtz Watson calls me names just because of how many views the video about Charlie Kirk got. Bob Smith says, listen to your audience. Well, or remember when Trump was censored and banned from Twitter? He was suspended and didn't have a constitutional right to a platform. I've said this in both videos. You don't have the constitutional right to have a YouTube account or a social media platform. I think suspending people for, making jokes or celebrating is stupid. If they're calling for violence, that's a different story, but it should be the social media companies deciding, not the state. Justin Weber again commented the same thing, so I'm just going to ignore that because I already responded. Then Necronics 9947 said, nobody... Can you people do yourself a favor and just proofread your comments, please? Nobody is losing their freedom of speech, just their jobs, for saying stupid shit that make the companies they work for look bad. Again, members of Congress have been pressuring companies to fire people and ban people from their platforms for saying stuff that they don't like. The state has no right to do that, plain and simple. And all these people who said, we're free speech warriors, the left are taking this too far, 9 years ago, all of a sudden, now they're snowflakes. 2024, what happened to Donald Trump? And 2025, what happened to Charlie Kirk? So, to all the people who are upset about the jokes and the celebrations, go fuck yourselves and grow a spine. Now, if you object to people calling for more violence, then I don't disagree with you. But get a grip.